Hey everybody, welcome to another World of Tanks replay. This one's from Broseph, and this is in the MT-25. Now this is the little light tank that replaced the T-50-2 when it was removed from the game. It would have been a couple of years ago now. It has not quite the same mobility the 50-2 had, but it's still pretty good. It was actually buffed after being introduced. But it's still one of the less popular light tanks. I was going to say least popular, but I'm not sure if I want to put myself that far out on a limb. You don't see them very often. Generally, people just grind through it to get the LTTB and don't really play it again. Now, of course, Broseph has always had a bit of an affinity for the Soviet light tanks. Back in the olden days of Goon Clan Wars, he used to roll the T-50 a lot, the original T-50, and was pretty good at getting the enemy team to just waste shells all game, trying to kill him and failing to do so. In this case, he takes a rather unorthodox spawning route, while the two Chai light tanks head up for the Abbey where they usually go, and of course tangle with the two enemy light tanks, including a T-49, which can't possibly end well for them. Broseph decides to do some exploring along the eastern ridgeline. The 50-2 had one of the highest power to weight ratios in the game, and from what I recall, the MT-25 is similarly well endowed. So it's able to climb quite happily up obstacles that lesser tanks wouldn't be able to handle. It's also quite good at accelerating. It's also a phenomenal drifter, much like the 50-2 used to be. It's armed with a 57mm gun. It's basically a death of 1,000 cuts type thing. It can be effective when you're top tier or when you're in a tier 7 or... well, you are top tier in a tier 7 game, but when you're in a tier 7 or 8 game, I should say, it can be effective, but in a tier 9 game it's not really the kind of firepower you want. And Broseph finds a nice bush up here which allows him to get eyes on the Abbey without exposing his tank. Of course, the friendly light tanks up there were wiped out by the enemy lights. It seems to be more or less a case of mutually assured destruction. The only survivor of that light tank brawl was in fact the enemy Bulldog, which has come out of it with 2 kills. Broseph's team is taking their sweet fucking time to get into position. Only just now are the Sant and KV-5 pushing up the west side. The IS-8 has been hiding back in the H line the whole time, and this means the MT-75 is able to push all the way down to G1 without getting lit. Of course, when he does finally get lit, he's up in the IS-8's grill. If you let enemy heavies that far down the west flank without even spotting them, you're going to have a bad day. Having done pretty much everything he can from this position, Broseph starts looking for other options. There's not much point sitting around just to try and keep that one Pershing lit, particularly now it's behind the buildings. The T-29 is not in a position where Broseph can easily hit it, and of course there's not much he can do about the west flank. So with that in mind, he goes on a little adventure down the hill and begins working his way towards the enemy side of the map. He sees an opening here. The enemy don't appear to have anything covering this area. The T-29 is covering the west side, the JT is coming down the east road, nothing's been lit here, and he hasn't been shot at yet, which is generally a good sign that the flank's open. Sorry about the rubber banding, that is an issue with the replay, I can't do anything about it. Broseph takes a little jump up into the base, spots a 53-55, and then immediately spots the Batchat as it fires its gun. He finishes it first, then turns to deal with the 53-55. The 57 doesn't have the best accuracy on the move, but it is workable. You do have to get in close to whatever you're shooting, however. In this case, he's able to do it relatively safely. The 53-55 is just fired, and the T-29 is a really bad shot. That shell came out of the barrel sideways, and with a nice little drift, he gets up next to the Tiger P, who does actually appear to be loaded. So Broseph sits in behind it and begins finishing it off. Oh my. What is going on there? Looks like his shells were actually going underneath the gun and then just disappearing into the ether. They weren't even counting as critical hits, they weren't hitting crew or hitting the gun. The enemy T-29 actually team kills the GW Tiger P while trying to hit Broseph, and that leaves him free to scoot down the west side of the map and go to help the IS-8 deal with the Tortoise. Now the IS-8 is in dire straits when it comes to hit points, and having a Tortoise pushing on you when you've only got 76 health in an IS-8 is fucking terrifying. Thankfully for him, Broseph is sneaking up on it undetected, and is in a perfect position to start laying shots into its engine. And the 57mm against a Tortoise is basically just pecking it to death, but with the help of a nice fire and some incoming arty support, down it goes. This is already a pretty good match for an MT-25 in a tier 9 match, but Broseph's not done yet. Scooting down the hill, he begins heading back towards the 6 line to get back into the enemy side of the map and see what he can do there. The friendly T-28 Proto is slowly working his way up the 8 and 9 lines. It looks like he's actually stopped at the moment. He must be waiting for the enemy to reveal themselves. And there we go, he's actually moving now. The Super Pershing is sitting up in the town, and the IS-8 is too scared to move after losing all his hit points, which is kind of silly since the entire west flank is now clear and he could quite happily push down it all the way to the enemy base before getting shot at by the T-29. Anyhow, Broseph does a little loop around here to see if he can proxy the enemy TDs. Sure enough, proxies both of them. And then, with them lit for the T-28 and the arty, he doubles back to make his getaway. The Rheinmetall lights itself by finishing off the Super Pershing, and Broseph goes back down towards his own base to approach from another angle. The JT has been dealt with by arty. The friendly IS-8 has actually just drowned itself trying to get off that hill it was stuck on. So it's now on Broseph and the T-28 to carry. The Jagdpanther on the friendly team is, of course, a fucking bot, naturally. But they do still have 3 arty. One of them is quite good. And so they've got that working in their favour. And the arty are, in fact, platooned. Although I think that was partially formed in this battle, so I don't know how coordinated they'll be. Broseph nearly goes down to the Jagdpanther, but is able to get away from it. And then manages to clown it. And a very, very nice shot from the GW Panther lands directly on top of it, finishing it off without splashing Broseph. Of course, if he had made a near miss, it probably would have killed both of them. Broseph still has to worry about the Rheinmetall, which is up on that ridge overlooking the enemy cap. The T-29 has actually pushed the west flank now, and is in the friendly base, but gets shotgunned by the 53-55. Broseph doubles back around, looking to get eyes on that Rheinmetall. Friendly T-28 Proto is moving in, but Broseph gets singled out for destruction there. I'm just going to hit the time acceleration here because I don't want to have to sit around watching a T-28 slowly crawl towards the enemy. But all in all, a good game in a very underrated tank. In the right hands, an MT-25 can be an absolute nightmare for a team to deal with, not just because of its spotting, but also because of its excellent mobility and its ability to just come up behind things and peck them to death, then run away laughing. The Rheinmetall gets a single shot into the T-28 before being finished off by the GW Panther, and that's a win.